Man, that was one of the saddest fights that I've ever watched. And before I really break down the specifics of this fight, though, I just want to say congratulations to Gilbert Burns for having a great career because the guy's just been putting on entertaining scraps over the last couple of years. And he basically fought everybody in the division, regardless of the circumstances. So the fans will always remember you as a true BMF. That being said, though, it was very clear that Gilbert Burns was nowhere near his prime in this fight. Because the one thing that was very apparent, Gilbert Burns just cannot take damage at this point. Because Mike Malott TKO'd him in the third round. And I understand that Mike Malott has a couple of KOs here and there, but against who? Other than Radke, I never really rated any one of Mike Malott's wins. So the fact that Gilbert Burns got TKO'd with no resistance, it just kind of felt sad to me in a way. Because I am still convinced that Gilbert Burns in his prime would beat Mike Malott pretty easily. And Mike Malott, I still don't think he's a legitimate prospect, no matter how much the UFC tried to prop him up because he's a DEI industry plant. I still don't believe in Mike Malott for serious championship aspirations. But he still got the job done against washed Gilbert Burns. I will say, though, the fact that he couldn't put him away in the first round and actually gave me a false sense of hope, it is kind of concerning. I do think that guys above Mike Malott in the rankings would easily beat him. But who knows, maybe this guy's making improvements at the age of 35, and the UFC are going to give him, the easiest matchups even after Gilbert Burns, which, to be honest, I don't know who else Mike Malott can find at this point. But that being said, though, Mike Malott got the job done against the old dead corpse of Gilbert Burns, and overall, it was a very sad thing to watch, which is why I don't want to talk about this fight anymore, but yeah, I just feel bad for Gilbert Burns because had this been 2-3 years ago, I do think that Gilbert Burns would easily beat Mike Malott because Mike Malott, he's not really all that special. And even though he beat Gilbert Burns, it wasn't very convincing. And I still believe that Gilbert Burns would have beat him, if he could still take damage the same way like he did in his prime. Moving on to Kyler Phillips versus Charles Jourdain. Charles Jourdain gets the job done in a pretty fun fight. And I just want to say, overall, Jourdain looked good in moments. I love how he pushes the action and tries to make it a very grimy fight, and the teeps up the middle were money for Jourdain. But the one thing that did concern me, though, is his boxing defense, because Kyler Phillips was able to piece him up in the boxing, and that is kind of concerning considering Kyler Phillips isn't exactly the best boxer. But either way, though, Charles Jourdain did get the job done in the later rounds, using his grit and grime in order to kind of wear down on Kyler Phillips. So overall, I thought it was a good fight. I do think that Charles Jourdain should be a ranked bantamweight come this Tuesday. I know Kyler Phillips technically isn't ranked right now, but he was ranked at the time that this fight was booked. So I do think that Charles Jourdain should deserve a ranking at this point. But yeah, overall, though, Jourdain got the job done. I'm actually very happy for him. He's one of the few entertaining Canadian fighters on the roster that doesn't need any DEI privileges in order to, get high-profile matchups. And overall, I think that Jourdain can actually make it pretty far in this division. It just depends on the matchups, in my opinion. This fight was insane for as long as it lasted. This is certainly not how I thought the fight would go down. I thought if Herbert was going to win, I thought it would be a boring NPC decision where not much really happens. But in this fight, Herbert, not only did he stand his base against Mandel Nallo when Nallo was coming in all aggressive and trying to TKO Herbert immediately, Herbert actually threw back and dropped Mandel Nallo twice and eventually put him away with ground and pound shots in the first round. Again, not what I expected out of Jai Herbert, but the guy developed knockout power in his hands at the age of 37. And overall, this was a very entertaining scrap because both guys were trying to go for each other's heads from the moment the bell rang. So overall, I gotta say, even though I was wrong about this prediction, Jai Herbert actually looked good. So I'm not too mad about it, even though I thought that Mandel Nallo was going to beat Jai Herbert. All right, now moving on to Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Karine Silva. Not exactly the most entertaining fight. If anything, I would say it's underwhelming because I expected Jasudavicius to at least dominate Karine Silva, even if it went to a decision. But this was like kind of a competitive fight early on. Karine Silva was doing a good job keeping the fight on the feet. But the second Jasudavicius went for a takedown, Karine Silva just instantly pulled guard, trying to submit her off her back. And Jasudavicius, it took her a while to really get things going. But in the second and third round, Jasudavicius found her takedowns a lot easier than in the first. And eventually she was able to prolong the grappling exchanges and keep longer times in top control. I do wish she threw a little bit more ground and pound. Because at times it just felt like she was smudging Karine Silva against the canvas. But Jasudavicius did get the job done, so I'm not going to criticize her too much. But overall, I did not find this performance to be all that convincing that she's going to get back to a potential title shot. But either way, though, Jasudavicius, she got the job done, so I'm not going to criticize her too much. Man, what has happened to Thaigo Moises? Like, the guy went from being the person to test Islam Makhachev on the come-up, taking Islam Makhachev down and getting him into the fourth round of Makhachev's first main event, to now being the guy that gets beat up by anybody on the lightweight roster. Like, Gokhan pieced up Thaigo Moises for nearly 3 rounds. I'm actually confused as to why one judge gave the fight to Thaigo Moises. But regardless, though, Gokhan, he just styled on Thaigo Moises. And I would say it's impressive because Gokhan did look really good in that fight. But at the same time, though, we've seen a lot of guys at this point just style on Thaigo Moises. So it's very disappointing that Thaigo Moises, despite being, 31 years old, he fights like he's 40 at this point. Like, the guy just looks unbelievably washed. So I don't know how good Gokhan is, to be honest, but he did win, which, he was kind of in desperate need for a win in the UFC. But either way, though, this wasn't exactly a convincing win by any means, because I think Thaigo Moises from 4 years ago would have beat Gokhan. But maybe Gokhan, he's made massive improvements, since his loss to Evan Elder and Uza guys. Oh yeah, Quillen Sal killed. But either way, though, I do feel like Thaigo Moises just looks unbelievably washed for someone who should be in the prime of his career, considering he's only 31 years old. Marcio Barbosa just flatlined Denis Buzujka in the first round. I'm actually convinced that Buzujka is still not even conscious at this point, because the way Buzujka just fell over, I thought the man died at that point. But yeah, shout out to Marcio Barbosa. He definitely deserves a performance bonus for that KO. But Barbosa, do I think he's gonna get into the rankings of the featherweight division? I don't know. After all, it's Denis Buzujka after all. But according to the eye test, I do think that Marcio Barbosa is a prospect to be out on the lookout for. The guy's just very calm on the feet, as well as very dangerous, because the guy has nuclear power in his hands. But overall, though, he did it against Denis Buzujka, not exactly the highest level of competition, so I'm going to need to watch him fight one more time before I really am convinced on him. But based on the eye test, I think he's a prospect to be on the lookout for. So, yeah, I'm actually excited to watch Marcio Barbosa moving forward in his UFC career. Now, did Robert Valentin actually level up his game, or is Julien Leblanc really awful? I can't tell, but Robert Valentin looked good in there. And for once, he got a UFC dub, which he really needed. And considering that his mother passed away recently, I feel for the man, so I'm not really going to make any criticisms necessarily against him. That being said, though, I don't think Julien Leblanc is the best opponent, but maybe Robert Valentin wins a couple more fights in the UFC and proves that, he actually leveled up ever since his first few losses in the UFC. But either way, I'm rooting for the guy. So hopefully Robert Valentin can actually make a comeback. Yeah, moving on to Tanner Boser versus Gokhan Saricam. I'm not going to lie, I thought that this fight was kind of looking dog shit prior to Saricam dropping him with the right hand and knocking him out. Because both guys just looked very sluggish and slow in there. But because it's Tanner Boser, someone who gets victimized on a regular basis, eventually Gokhan was able to find the right hand down the pipe to drop him and eventually get the TKO. Now, I'm still not convinced of Gokhan Saricam. After all, it is Tanner Boser, who is a DEI hire purely because he's from Canada. But he got the job done in a brutal KO, so maybe the UFC is actually invested in him as well, because the UFC is also looking for more Turkish prospects every day. But this wasn't exactly a win that convinced me that Gokhan Saricam's gonna be a special prospect to be out on the lookout for, because he took Tanner Boser to the second round. Like, please finish Tanner Boser within the first 5 minutes of the fight. If you're going to be a legitimate prospect, the UFC should keep eyes on. But he still got the job done. I'm not going to congratulate him that much. Like, it is fucking Tanner Boser after all. But he did win, so I guess good job for him. This fight was a lot better than what I expected, because I thought if Melissa Croden's going to win this fight, she's just going to smudge Daria Zhelezniakova against the cage for nearly 2 to 3 rounds. Maybe she gets a takedown here and there, but I thought that there wasn't going to be much striking. But for 15 minutes straight, both of these women scrapped down, and Melissa Croden was able to come out on top by just, pressuring forward and having the better boxing than Daria Zhelezniakova. Now, I do think that this fight was a lot better than I expected. Do I think Melissa Croden is going to be a rank caliber contender to be out on the lookout for? Probably not, but she is very fun, especially for women's bantamweight standards. So I wouldn't mind if the UFC actually decided to push her, because we desperately need more talent in women's bantamweight. But either way, though, Melissa Croden gets the job done. It was a pretty fun, entertaining scrap, which I didn't think it was going to happen, considering most women's bantamweights fights, they don't really end in entertaining scraps. Now, I'm seeing a lot of people saying that Jamey-Lyn Horth should have won this fight. Me, personally, I don't really care, because upon glancing over this fight and rewatching some of the parts whenever we were in commercial break, I would say Jamey-Lyn Horth should have won the first 2 rounds. I don't know what the judges were scoring, but am I really mad about it? Not really, because this fight wasn't great. Like, it was just JJ Aldrich just shadowboxing out of range. Jamey-Lyn Horth landed a couple of more strikes, but not by much. So I don't think either of these women really showed any high-level MMA. So I'm not really mad because Jamey-Lyn Horth didn't get the correct decision. But still, though, like, it was not a great fight by any means, so I'm not really losing sleep over the fact that Jamey-Lyn Horth lost a robbery decision. So, yeah, overall, this was a terrible fight, and I wouldn't be shocked if both of these women get cut from the roster after this. Now, I will say this, John Castaneda looked like the better fighter in this fight, but unfortunately, because he kicked Mark Vologdin in the nuts twice, a point got taken off, and this fight was scored a draw, which is the correct scorecard. Right? I thought that Mark Vologdin won the first round, just being more aggressive and using as speed and power in order to overwhelm John Castaneda. But in the later rounds, Castaneda showed his veteran experience and his grit, and also his strength, which typically Castaneda doesn't get to show off because he gets frame mugged by most bantamweights on the roster. But unfortunately, because Mark Vologdin is 5'3", John Castaneda was able to use his frame and just prolong clinch and wrestling exchanges and just kind of gas out Mark Vologdin as the fight progressed. Yannis gets the job done over Siraj in the first round. I will say the elbows over the top were nasty, which is ultimately what put away Siraj. But I will say that Siraj is just awful because we've seen a lot of guys beat Yannis. All right, I don't think that Yannis is anything particularly special, even after this win, because I just think that Siraj just looked awful in there. Like, especially on the feet, the guy had nothing to offer. He just got victimized by Yannis for like nearly the entire first round. And as soon as Siraj got badly wobbled, he instantly shot for a shitty takedown and got his stuff, then eventually just curled up in the ball in order to accept defeat, Anthony Smith style. Alright, y'all, that's going to be it for this video. If you guys want to see more videos like this, please make sure to like and subscribe so we can monetize this channel. But leave your comments down below what you guys thought about UFC Winnipeg, as well as any other video suggestions you have for me in the comments. But yeah, other than that, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.